Hi, welcome to another video by Paper Love by readysetlove. Today I'm going to show you how to make this small love note using Stampin' Up set Up, Up, and Away. So first we're going to grab a piece of white paper and we're going to stamp on it 3 balloons to make our 3D balloon effect. For this particular card I chose Melon Mambo as the ink and the polka dot balloon to stamp with. So we're going to stamp it 3 times. And once you're done, we're going to go ahead and cut them out. You want to cut as close as you can to the edge of the balloons. We're going to distress the edges later, so if there's any mistakes, we shouldn't be able to see them. So once you're done cutting, you'll have the 3 balloons. We need to fold them in half in order to make the 3D effect. So using a Score Buddy or Score Pal, whatever your favorite scoring tool is, we're going to fold it in half like so. I just took the balloon and lined it up against one of the lines down the center of the balloon and scored it. I made sure that it scored perfectly in half. That's essential to the balloon edges matching up to create the effect. To glue the balloons together, I just used a normal Scotch glue stick. Use a scratch piece of paper in the background to help with the glue. You glue just 1/2 of the balloon, don't glue both sides. And you're going to take this piece once you're done gluing and match it up to another half of a second balloon piece, like so. Then to glue the 3rd balloon, also just glue only 1/2 and attach it to another side. You won't glue the other 2 together because those 2 pieces are going to lie flat onto the back of the card. And make sure they're nice and glued before you start maneuvering them, nice and dry. And you have your hot air balloon. If you want to hide the blemishes of the white from your cutting, just grab a sponge dauber and the color ink that you were using and distress the edge to help with the hiding any type of cutting mistake that you might have made. And we have our balloon. So now I'm going to bring back the card and show you what our next step is. We're going to be adding the background by distressing on the clouds. For this I used a 3" by 3" piece of white paper. Grab something to distress on. I have a stencil that I found at a craft store that has a cloud effect on one side. So I'm going to use that and lay it right down onto the piece of paper. And using Baja Breeze and a sponge dauber, I just lightly tapped onto the paper the ink. You're going to go all the way around, and depending on how dark you want your clouds to be is how much ink you'll put onto the paper. So if you want something light, you only have to go over once. If you want something darker, go over a couple times. And if you want to have your sky much darker, just rub the sponge in and darken the sky. It's all up to your personal choice. So we're done with our first layer of clouds. To add a second layer, I'm just going to put the stencil right back in and slightly off so you don't have the exact same clouds. And for this I sponged lightly so it doesn't overwhelm the cloud behind. And there's our background. Our clouds are now distressed on. Our next step is going to be adding the sentiment as well as the rest of the hot air balloon. For this I used the Up in the Air Over You stamp, the basket, and the tail with flags on it. To ink the stamps I used Stampin' Up's Stampin' Right markers in Rich Razzleberry, Melon Mambo, and Concord Crush. I used the Concord Crush to color in the words on the sentiment. make sure your stamp is in place before you start coloring. To help, I huff on the back of it to add hot air, and it creates more of a suction between the stamp and the clear block. So like I said, I'm using the Concord Crush to color in all of the words on the sentiment. Make sure everything's covered nice and well with the markers. And for the hearts on the sentiment, I used Melon Mambo. So once you are done coloring in your sentiment, we're going to stamp it into the lower left-hand corner. And press down, and our sentiment is stamped. I used Rich Razzleberry to color the basket of the hot air balloon. Same technique, just coloring it in. And to help with the placement of the basket, grab your hot air balloon, put it approximately where you want it onto the card, and you'll know where your basket will be. So stamp that on. And the last stamping we'll do is the tail with the flags. For this I used all three colors. I used the Concord Crush to color in the string, if you will, on the flags. And then alternating between Rich Razzleberry and Melon Mambo, I colored in each of the flags. I'm going to be stamping this onto the basket below the hot air balloon. I recommend, if you're not too confident with the placement of a stamp, to use your Stamp-A-Majig. I like to just guess, which sometimes can be a mistake or two, but I feel pretty confident with my guesstimations. And there we go, we have our tail with flags on our hot air balloon. So now we have our sentiment and our hot air balloon all stamped. We're going to glue our balloon on. So for this, I attempted to use my glossy accents to create a sturdier bond. This is important to stay in place, so use some good glue here, but for some reason it wasn't coming out, so I threw on a little bit of glue stick glue. And you're just going to glue it right onto the card with right above the basket. Press down nice and good to make sure it sticks, and we have our balloon. So now we're going to add it to the card base. I have already cut and scored some pink cardstock and designer paper, which I distressed the edges in Melon Mambo with. The pink cardstock is cut to 7 inches by 3.5 with the score at 3.5 as well. And the pattern paper is 3.25 by 3.25, and like I said, the white is 3 inches by 3 inches. We're going to glue the white cardstock onto the designer paper. I realized as I was gluing this down that probably could have waited to glue the balloon on last, so if you're making this card, I recommend gluing the balloon on last. But you can just flatten the balloon to add the glue and it works just fine. So add this to the center of our card and press down to make sure it's nice and secured. And we have our final card. So there's our balloon and our sentiment, part in the focusing, and we have our up in the air over you love note. Thanks for joining me.